Welcome to Bible Talk, where we talk about the Bible. And today we are in Genesis 5, which is one of my favorite chapters, which is interesting because a lot of people don't like the genealogy chapters, but I love them and I love the stories that the genealogy tells us. And we'll get a little bit into that after we talk about Genesis 5. So let's go ahead and start reading the chapter. If you have your own Bible, and I hope you do, read along with me in your version. And I appreciate people that read different versions than I do. I'm reading out of the NCV, but you read out of the version that you prefer. This is the family history of Adam. When God created human beings, he made them in his own likeness. He created them male and female, and on that day he blessed them and named them human beings. When Adam was 130 years old, he became the father of another son in his likeness and image, and Adam named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. So Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. When Seth was 105 years old, he had a son named Enosh. After Enosh was born, Seth lived 807 years and had other sons and daughters. So Seth lived a total of 912 years, and then he died. When Enosh was 90 years old, he had a son named Kenan. After Kenan was born, Enosh lived 815 years and had other sons and daughters. So Enosh lived a total of 905 years, and then he died. When Kenan was 70 years old, he had a son named Mahalalel. After Mahalalel was born, Kenan lived 840 years and had other sons and daughters. So Kenan lived a total of 910 years, and then he died. When Mahalalel was 65 years old, he had a son named Jared. After Jared was born, Mahalalel lived 830 years and had other sons and daughters. So Mahalalel lived a total of 895 years, and then he died. When Jared was 162 years old, he had a son named Enoch. After Enoch was born, Jared lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. So Jared lived a total of 962 years, and then he died. When Enoch was 65 years old, he had a son named Methuselah. After Methuselah was born, Enoch lived with God 300 years more and had other sons and daughters. So Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked with God. One day Enoch could not be found, because God took him. When Methuselah was 187 years old, he had a son named Lamech. After Lamech was born, Methuselah lived 782 years and had other sons and daughters. So Methuselah lived a total of 969 years, and then he died. When Lamech was 182, he had a son. Lamech named his son Noah, and he said, "He will comfort us in our work which comes from the ground the Lord has cursed." After Noah was born, Lamech lived 595 years and had other sons and daughters. So Lamech lived a total of 777 years, and then he died. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay, so that was a lot of genealogy, but there's a lot of other stuff that is packed in there. So to paraphrase it, Adam has Seth, this is after all of the sin has happened, after Cain killed Abel and Cain moved away, and then God blessed them with another son to replace Abel, and they had Seth. And then Seth had a kid who had a kid who had a kid who had a kid who had Enoch. Enoch was the only one, they said, that walked with the Lord, and they didn't say that he died. God just took him, which is really, really cool. And then Enoch had a son who had a son who had a son, and then we get to Lamech, and remember, we heard about Lamech already, who had the two wives. The first one that talks about polygamy, and he's boasting about how he killed a young man, and saying that if somebody should kill him, then they should be punished 77 times or whatever. But anyways, seems like an evil person. He is the father of Noah, which is just blows my mind that Noah came from somebody like that. And then Noah had his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So First of all, in reading this chapter, I think that they lived an extremely long time, and it kind of is funny nowadays when we say that somebody in their 60s is now getting old. Um, but it seems like 100 years old, 300 years old is pretty young for back then because people lived so long. But we find out later in the Bible that now the human span is 120 years. But back then, it was like almost 1,000 years. And it's really interesting if you go through and you use those numbers that they give, because they say Adam lived to be this old and these people were born when this person was this age. And if you go through and you do all of the math, which I have done, Adam was alive and knew all the way down to Lamech. He died before Noah was born, but so he didn't get to meet Noah. And his son Seth did not get to meet Noah, and Enoch did not get to meet Noah. So these men that I think were probably out of that list of genealogy closest to God, it was interesting that they died before Noah's generation, right before Noah's generation, because all three of them, including Enoch, knew Lamech, which is Noah's dad. They didn't know Noah. That it was after they had died that the world was so wicked that God eventually had to destroy it. So that's what I mean by genealogy tells the story. If you're looking at and doing the math of all of this, it's just interesting to see that these men of God died right before the most innocent man, according to the Bible, was born, Noah. And also, if you look at it, Methuselah, who's Noah's grandpa, so he was the father of Lamech, Methuselah, if you go through and you look at his age and you do the timing and the math, he died in the flood. So Noah's grandpa didn't make it onto the ark. Lamech didn't make it onto the ark either, but he wasn't alive. He died before the flood came. But Methuselah died the same year as the flood. So I'm assuming he died in the flood. But that's also my opinion just from doing, all of the math and looking at all of the genealogy, because I just love genealogy. Let me see if I have any notes on here from when I was reading this earlier today. It talks about God's likeness in verse 1, I believe. No, in verse 2, he created them male and female, and on that day he blessed them and made them human beings. So again, that's saying that God, in verse 1, he created the human beings and made them in his own likeness. He created them male and female. So that goes back to reiterating that God has both male and female characteristics in him and traits in him, and that we are both made in his likeness. So Adam, Seth, and Enoch were the only ones in Adam's genealogy to not know Noah. And then after that, I think my notes go into Genesis 6. So let's look at what the Bible says about God. So in chapter 5, the only thing that I found as far as what the Bible has to say about God is that it has both male and female traits, which we've already talked about that. A really good example in the Bible for us is that Enoch walked with the Lord. It says that in verse 22 through 25, how he walked with the Lord. He lived with the Lord. He had this relationship and communion with him, and that the Lord just took him. And I don't know if it was because he wanted Enoch to be with him, or clearly Enoch wanted to be with him. But Enoch didn't die. It just says that the Lord took him. They were walking, having fellowship, and then the Lord just took him to be with him. And he didn't experience that physical death that human beings normally experience. But it's just a good example of how we should be walking with the Lord every day and be having that communion with the Lord every day. I couldn't find any promises in the Bible other than it talks about the genealogy, and God was talking about how you should go out and you should multiply, be fruitful and multiply. And so it's just showing that, but it's not necessarily a promise. So we're going to move on to people in the Bible, which Genesis 5 has a lot of. And I'm going to go ahead and put the family tree up here that you can see from Adam all the way down to Noah's 3 sons. It's really small, so I will blow it up when we get down to Enoch so that you can see that. But we've got Adam, which God created Adam, and then his 3rd son, Seth, who has Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, and I don't know if I'm saying these right, Jared, and then there's Enoch. Enoch has Methuselah, which is Noah's grandpa. Methuselah has Lamech, which is Noah's father, the polygamist. And then Noah has his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And that is where Genesis 5 ends. And then in Genesis 6, we find out a little bit more of Noah's lineage that happens. The timeline that we are at now is we have the creation of the world, we have the fall of man, we have Cain killing Abel, Cain going away and creating his own family, and then we have Seth that is born, and this whole lineage, I think I'm saying the word wrong, but his whole family line in Genesis chapter 5, and we're getting ready to come up on the flood, which happens, I believe, in Genesis chapter 7 or 8. So we have one more chapter before we get to that. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed. This was a very, very quick study. So I think I'm just going to hop right into Genesis 6 after this. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Leave any comments down below if you have questions about anything, or if you have anything to teach me. I am always willing to hear what it is that you have to say and learn from you as I am going through this chronological study of the Bible. Thanks so much, and I will see you tomorrow.